But yeah, I've been doing YouTube since about 2016, 2017, and I just like many of the videos that I will be making for this YouTube channel. I have already discussed this topic at length. I'm just revisiting it because it's so important. People are still talking about it. Um, all these topics, all these aspects of African American heritage and culture have always been relevant. They have always been relevant no matter what conservatives try to tell you with that alt history, false equivalence, straw man speak that they speak. These topics are not new. And even if they were new, that doesn't just because a topic is new does not necessarily mean that it's unimportant. But these topics are not only important, they have been relevant since your grandparents, your great grandparents. They've been relevant since before before the colonies became the United States. These conversations, these these objective, real experiences and truths of the African American experience that are also the histories of white folks. Just the history that a lot of y'all out there do not want to examine, do not want to confront. A history that feeds into relevance right now. It's not just historically happening. This discrimination is happening right now. Has always been relevant for hundreds of years. But anyway, I've been politically active since I was a small child. I've been active in African American culture since I was a small child. Um, One of the first big presentations I ever did was when I was in grade school at St. Matthew's, St. Matthew's College, St. Matthew's grade school in Glendale Heights, in Illinois. When I was a little boy, one of the things I taught, one of my presentations was about how Africans did have civilizations and Africans did have swords, and the idea that they didn't was racist, anti-African descent propaganda. It was straight up white supremacist, European colonial-esque propaganda. Of course, I know a lot more now than I did back then because I was a kid, but that's how long I've been doing it. Wish I could show you, but I'm pretty sure my parents did record it, but I don't know where that tape is. And if it is somewhere in this house, my mom's house, my mom and dad's house, it's probably destroyed. Just old, you know. But I wanted to speak on this. Like, what do I think of Republicans? Well, what do I think of Republicans and conservatives? Like, before 2024, like back in like 2015 and 2017 when Ben Shapiro's popularity was skyrocketing and conservatives were really taking advantage, right wingers were really taking advantage of non-black Americans, not just limited to white Americans either, Asian Americans, model minorities, etc., taking advantage of non-black Americans' willful ignorance, not just ignorance. Sometimes it is ignorance, but also often willful ignorance, taking advantage of their willful ignorance of African American people to basically get political moves, get political clout, to use African American people to scapegoat them, to knock out two birds with one stone. How can we further systemically discriminate and oppress African American people, devaluing their objective experiences and what they're trying to tell us? How can we continue to systemically oppress them, and then how can we make our climbs, our moves politically to support a white supremacist, white nationalist leaning, misogynistic capitalist system? Like, how can we do that? And again, it's been going on. That's a strategy that that has been used since before this country was a country. It's been used since when we were colonies. Obviously, there's been transformations, but it goes back all the way to the beginnings and the origins of European colonization of the Americas and the usage of enslaved Africans upon stolen indigenous American land. How can we do this? How can we continue this? Again, not new. And again, this idea that Republicans reflect Abraham Lincoln, which, Abraham Lincoln has issues in of himself, and the abolitionists that were around him, most of them were racist. They were anti-African racists, a lot of them. So they were not a party that was separate from the systemic scientific racisms of the time. But Republicans, I'm tired of Republicans. They still do this. Prager University still does this. They still try to hang on to that Lincoln image of Republicans. Again, that was already flawed, even if you try to say that. But that's incorrect because the Republicans that we're dealing with now, from Trump, have their roots going all the way back to the rise of the right in the Republican Party, in the Republican sphere, of a post-Nixon, post-Ronald Reagan, who is Satan himself, Republican Party. Okay, and people think Trump is bad. They think him calling out the Proud Boys is bad. People think that the racism in the anti-black racism that encircles Biden is bad and all of that stuff. And do nothing Democrat. The Ronald Donald Trump is a stupid version of Ronald Reagan, which is still extremely dangerous, obviously. Uh, Again, but you get the point. I'm getting on a ramble. But this anti-African racism and all the intersectionality that comes with agendas that are born from that, and these white nationalist, white supremacist, white nationalist Christian leanings, Christian extremist leanings and such, not new with the Republican Party at all. Again, go back to Ronald Reagan. Go back to Lee Atwater, if I'm saying his name right. Go back to Nixon, etc., etc. But getting to my point, that probably lets you know right off the bat what I think of what I thought of the Republican Party. But here's the thing: what did I think of the right wingers when I was younger? When I was like in my early 20s, when I was really starting college back, and again, right when like scapegoating the Black Lives Matter movement and black people in general as right wingers were doing back in 2015, 2016. What did I think of them? Well, hypocrites. They were tattling on themselves. Again, I'm more articulate now, hanging out with other people that I've learned words that can better articulate my point as opposed to back then. But hypocrites, tattling on themselves, Republicans and the right wingers in general, because the far right and the right at this point are pretty much the same thing. And if they're not the same thing, if you can make an argument that they're not, they are extremely close. Okay, like the rise of the right in the United States under Trump, the rise of the right across Europe, etc., the rise of the right across South America and Latin America, where the majority of racially enslaved African women, men, and children were sent to, South America and the Caribbean. I paid attention to all that. Bolsonaro, the white Latino Donald Trump, and I don't mean that like symbolically. I quite literally mean that, to the point where gangs had to go out to create hand sanitizer, gangs in the favelas of Brazil to give them out to largely black and brown people, to largely Brazilians of African and indigenous descent, who just all of the systemic things and not being taken care of with the COVID outbreaks, the COVID-19 outbreaks in Brazil and all these other things. Paying attention to that keenly. All of that. Where was I? Right wingers are tattling on themselves. I'm old, okay? Right wingers were using, and idiots in general on the internet, showing their true colors, calling black people SJWs, calling black people SJWs, calling black people SJWs. SJW isn't really used that much anymore. It died off. I was trying to become politically active, or politically visible, always politically active. I was always politically active, but politically visible on the internet when that was peak, right? But that's SJW. When you think of SJW right now, you think of snowflakes. You think of people. You think of victim mentality. You think of people who believe that they're victims when they're not. Whether that's on a larger scale or on a personal scale. You could kind of equate almost SJW to Karen, but Karen, that's a very specific anti-black thing, to the point that even people that may be right leaning, even they are not cannot deny what the definition of a Karen is. But getting back to SJW, they understand that Karen is definitely associated with legitimate. It's all legitimate, but even they cannot deny the legitimacy of the Karen, of the white person, or just a non-black person that looks at another black person, a black child, a black woman, a black man, a group of black people that are actually not doing anything wrong. They're doing things, but they're not actually doing anything wrong, and freaks out and tries to call the police on them. In that discussion. But going back to SJW, when the right was doing these things, I'm like, you're describing yourself. I'm busy making art. That's what I'm doing. I'm still trying to do that. But I'm like, you're describing yourself. SJW, snowflake, victim mentality. These were like the biggest things that a lot of white Americans of European descent, immigrants, model minorities, not just limited to Asian Americans. You could also put some African immigrants, Africans with money, not the normal African people that live in the continent, but the Africans with gewgaws of money who come to the United States. These people who would not be able to even be here without the massive political and social change that African Americans created for people of color, including Africans. That's another conversation for another time. But all these different groups of people who were invested in anti-African American racism and leanings and agendas were saying these things to Black American people and other groups of people too, LGBTQ plus people. But again, there's no such thing, in my opinion, as the LGBTQ plus community. There's communities, because LGBT plus Q is not an ethnic group. It's not a race. It's not even an ethnic group. African Americans are an ethnic group. African Americans contributed to the creation of the LGBTQ plus community. And if you are Black and LGBTQ plus, you're both. You are part of a different community. You are both Black and LGBTQ plus, and you face discrimination from both groups. Non-Black people in the LGBTQ plus community discriminate against you because you are Black, or have biases against you because you are Black, fetishize you, all kinds of things. Because you're African American, and then others just simply because you're of African descent in general, and then you have a lot of the homophobia and transphobia, especially in the African American community. Again, more on that later. But you were having these words thrown at you. But all of these words, and let me see if I can even find it. All of these words describing that the right would use to try to discredit and describe the Black Americans. They were describing themselves, and I knew that even with my limited education back when I was first starting college, when SJW first started really being used on the internet. At least when I first started, I'm pretty sure it was being used way back before. But when it really gained traction on the internet, it was being used everywhere with Trump trying to become president, and the rise of Ben Shapiro dick writing, and Candace Owens and Larry Elder, all of them fools, all of them liars, all of them objectively lying about American history. And I mean objectively being wrong in their opinions, and objectively being wrong about American history, whether they're lying intentionally, which they are about certain things, and other things they think they're speaking the truth, but they're misunderstanding it. Just objectively wrong about American history, about the American present, about the African American past, and the African American present. Just objectively wrong about everything. Their rise, and seeing those terms being used, I was like, you're describing yourselves. You're describing yourselves. This is something I wrote back in 2017 or 2018, and I'm probably not going to read all of it, but let's go into it. Why not? SJW, lefty, libtard, diversity. These words don't make sense and never have. Again, this is 2017, 2018 me typing this. I was like 21 or 22. And never have. They are empty labels. Looking back in 2015 and 2016, I don't remember any words in my ears of living that have so quickly been made and have so swiftly, right after their formation, lost their meaning or credibility. Words that have been instantly reduced to tactics of name-calling. Name-calling in and of itself usually being wholly inaccurate labeling, even if you suggest, I'm not saying all of this is going to be the way that I would put it now, but understand the nuance, and please try to meet me halfway if some of this sounds weird. Try to understand what it is that I'm conveying, even if the words aren't perfect. Even if you suggest that SJW and words like it are linked to leftist and non-whites, kind of makes another claim. I don't like using the words progressive or leftist unless I have to, because African American experiences, the experiences of African American women, of African American men and children, and of other marginalized people, and the intersectionality of the fact that African Americans have a history as if not being a part of other marginalized groups, are the other marginalized groups. Black people are women. Black people are LGBTQ plus, etc. Black people are men. This stuff is not leftist or progressive. This is facts. These experiences are facts. I don't care if saying that the experiences of African Americans and Native Americans and other peoples in this country, and the contributions that they have contributed to this country, especially African Americans, more so, African Americans have contributed to this country more so than any group of people, You know, I could explain more on that, and when it comes to social change, social change, political change, cultural juggernaut change and contributions, there really is no other group that has contributed more so than African Americans, really. There's nuance, and that comes with an asterisk, but we're not going to go into that right now, but take what I'm saying. what we're saying in our experiences, misogyny, misogynoir, all of these things is objective. It's like saying that stuff is like, to me, like saying it's leftist or progressive is like me saying that the earth is round, telling you that the earth is round, which is a fact. There are some conversations in politics that are objective. Those are extremely important. Those are the important ones. And then there's stuff that is subjective. Important, but not as important as the objective stuff. Really changes people's lives and the lives of their future children, if they can even have children. Can we even have children now? But it's so expensive. I don't know if I'll be able to ever afford having a family. I don't know if I will. But like putting that under the label of leftist or progressive, no matter how well-meaning that is, to me is like me saying that the earth is round, and then you saying that's progressive, that's leftist, saying that climate change is very real, that it's happening, that there's a global extinction happening. Me looking at you and saying that, and you saying, oh, that's progressive, that's very liberal. Again, that's not progressive or liberal, that's just fact. But which is ironic, what right-wingers want to be, but they rarely ever are. In this context of the United States, in the context of its linkage to white nationalism and misogyny and white supremacy and all that pseudoscience, fake science garbage. But getting back to what I'm saying, words that have instantly where am I? Even if you suggest that SJW and words like it are linked to leftists and non-whites because the word racist is linked almost exclusively to whites and Republicans as of the 21st century, SJW still means, by most accounts, someone who sees social injustices against their group that aren't actually present, and if there is a little bit of it present, doesn't harm that group on a systemic level, does harm based on misconceptions, and that the accusation let me reread that. Someone who sees social injustice against their group that aren't actually present, and that does harm based upon their misconceptions, right? Does harm to others based on the misconception that they're being oppressed when they're not. And even if there is some oppression going on, it's not systemic. And while all people can and have racist elements in their groups, thus labeling racism as being exclusively white, completely wrong. Institutional or European, institutional racism or racism with power being linked to whites or the concept of whiteness has historic context and thus evidence. Just as important, racist as an inaccurate label currently is and was used against African descent people just as much as white people. White people felt victimized. White people still feel victimized, a lot of them. And that's why we still have this continuation of the right. And a big part of it was we voted for Trump because we feel that as a white women and white men that we're being oppressed under, what was it back then? What was the term they were using back then? Under political correctness. Give me a break. Even if there is some truth to that, it's not and still is not systemic. And for the most part, it wasn't oppressive. It wasn't oppressive at all. But again, white folks were saying that with the irony of, we're white people, we're being oppressed because we're being called racist sometimes when we're not. Look at black people, we're still being name called. Black people are still being called racist when we're not. Native Americans are called racist when they're not. And we're actually the group of people who are systemically oppressed because of our race, because we're women, because of that intersectionality of being non-white and being women. African Americans were at the bottom of the racial hierarchy, even beneath Native Americans. We're the groups of people that are systemically, that are institutionally oppressed in the past and still are oppressed now. But and every time we just try to mention, if there's anything you remember in my video, remember this, just us mentioning and trying to educate people of our oppression, so in hopes of that it will stop and we will gain reparations. Just the fact that we even do that to some people in America, to some non-black people in America, whites especially, but not limited to them, is a rallying cry that they are oppressed. You, white people, you feel oppression? You feel oppression because sometimes some people call you racist, and now you want to vote for, white nationalists and white supremacist leaning politicians. But black people, we're called racist just as much as white folks are, if not more so. And again, the irony is we're actually systemically oppressed. And we're often called racist or misogynistic for calling out the patriarchy and the anti-black racism and the intersectionality of all of those things. We're often called racist for just bringing that up when we're actually experiencing it. If there's nothing from any of my videos that I ever make on YouTube, remember the ridiculousness of that. I could have put it in a better way, but really, really, really think about that. Really think about what I just said. Really let that soak into your brain. And it's still happening as of 2024. God knows who's going to become president now. Where was I? Thus, and just as important, racist is an inaccurate label currently is and was used against African descent people in the United States. Since we're talking about a United States perspective, though this stuff is not being limited to the United States, you can take a lot of what I'm saying across Latin America, especially Brazil and the Caribbean, but and Europe, parts of Europe, was used against African race. The racist as an inaccurate label currently is and was used against African American descent people in North America just as much as European descent people in the United States, as much as towards white people, if not, well, actually more so, and depending on the era, or white white cisgendered people, white women, white men. Thus, SJW and words like it perfectly describe white people, the right, regardless of political affiliation, and white people in general as much as it does blacks or the left, apparently, if not more so. Race-based slavery was made for blacks, and institutional racism was used against blacks by whites. Have never had those things done to them by African Americans in the country on a systemic level. That being said, blacks inaccurately being called racists or militants or angry or etc. is worse, considering we actually were and are oppressed, the historic context. Before we go further, you're probably wondering if the word racism has lost its meaning. The truth is it hasn't and never will, because of the fact racism was and is a key pillar in American infrastructure. To be more exact, anti-Africanism was and is a key material used in every key American pillar. Hence why it's impossible to face institutional racism or its 21st century consequences head on without disturbing the comfortable convenience of this false peace. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, rabble rouser. These sheeple buzzwords, such as SJW, have immediately and repeatedly been blanketed over anybody that wants. I don't believe in inclusion. I believe in acknowledgement. African Americans and our ethnic group, African Americans, and the various ethnic groups we descend from Africa, and then indigenous American ethnic groups have always been here, contributing, in spite of a nation that wants to, that did and still does and still wants to take advantage of us, that wants to use us. We contribute, in spite of the United States, more often than because of it. It talks about oppression, American representation, criticizes white societies and American inequality. These passionate people, instead of being seen as the best of American pioneers and at their worst foolish but well-meaning and genuine, are generally incorrectly labeled as terrorists, hippies, anti-American, anti-white. How many times have black people been called anti-American and anti-white for just speaking the truth? But white people want to cry as if that they are systemically oppressed because a couple of individuals call them racist, when they're objectively not being. But there's tons of white people who are, and they're white people with power and a voice. While inequality has managed to survive and to continue in a variety of sizes and forms from its attack by African American political action, especially in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, etc., in U.S. society. Didn't really word that perfectly. Let me see. Let's continue. These words seem biased because they aren't any popular New Age words against the right or what we perceive to be the right and white extremist politics. Again, take this how I'm wording this. I'm wording this strangely, but again, I wrote this back in like 2017 or 2018. SJW always seems to reference non-whites and the left, or what we perceive as the left. When I think of the term social justice warrior, I think of Ben Shapiro or Alex Jones, Candace Owens, etc., the alt-right, anti-PC people. The PC is suppressing us. Jim Crow, KKK, people who call police on blacks knowing or unknowingly for a non-appropriate reason. Intentional racism, internalized biases, all these things. People who believe that white folks are currently being institutionally oppressed, or that men are being institutionally oppressed, or is headed that way. White folks in the southern part of the United States and in the north who were pro-enslavement, even if they didn't have enough money to purchase African women, men, and children and their descendants, supported the system because of this systemic idea that white people were oppressed. This is the same strategy used in European colonization of Africa. This is the same strategy used by white Latinos and white Hispanics across South America and the Caribbean. This idea that European descent people are burdened with spreading civilization, that they are the victims of these savage races, of these Native Americans, and at worst, in all of these European colonial systems, from the Spanish, the Portuguese, the English, the French, etc., Germans, in West Africa when they eventually were colonizing parts of West Africa, etc. All of it from race-based slavery to the colonization of Africa. All of it was deeply rooted in so many things, but in this taught and actually believing in the lies that they are spreading, this belief that white folks, that white Christians are burdened, are oppressed, if they don't that are burdened, and if they don't keep the races in their proper places in their proper racial hierarchy with African descent people at the bottom, if they don't do that, Western civilization will be destroyed. That it is white folks that are the victims of these savage races, of having to associate with them, the burden of having to teach them civilization, and the burden of the fear that if they don't keep tabs on them, they'll destroy the whiteness. The ridiculousness of that is that European colonization is deeply rooted in white victim mentality. Victim mentality is not an African American thing. It is not a person of color thing. It is not an African descent thing. But it is a white thing. Not for all white people, obviously, or individuals, but it is a thing that was and is very much loudly tied to the right and tied to leanings of white colonization, leanings towards white nationalism and white supremacy and white misogyny and misogyny in general, and and people who have those leanings. White victim mentality is tied to those things. Always has been, still is. But I think of blah, 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 blah. Nicki Minaj, what are you doing? Stop talking to Ben Shapiro. Just stop. Leave Megan alone. Megan Thee Stallion. Amazing talent. Amazing. If she keeps this up, she's going to be one of the GOATs. People that say, people who believe that whites are currently being institutionally oppressed or is headed that way. People that say their freedom is being taken away because certain people don't want a certain word being used by a group. Right-wingers who claim people don't take responsibility, and yet those same right-wingers never take responsibility for themselves, the BS they spread. The white folks that participate in this stuff, again, not counting the ones who don't, but the white folks that do, and the coon blacks who don't realize freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of consequences. That cry out their freedom is being taken away, and all the while having the gall to criticizing others for having that delusion of being wronged when no such wrong is being done. Preaching that propaganda from the race slave ports of old through the civil rights period to 2018, those words always seem connected to non-whites because of their connections to conversations about acknowledging America's inherent historical diversity. about diversity. That word doesn't make much sense, at least in the way that is often used. Diversity or forced diversity is often never forced, nor really diversity. America has always been diverse, and forced is simply America. Forced is simply America better representing the wide range of non-white humanity that has always been here and that has built this country. I was talking to, I wrote this back in 2018. Again, I wrote all this in 2018. I remember talking to my father about this. What about whites who see racism or anti-white agendas where there are none? This problem being rampant since the race slavery centuries, or the right-wingers who completely disregard people's feelings over their own, as blank says lefties do. Everything blank says can easily describe the right or the radical side of it. I mean, nowadays the whole right, the majority of the Republican Party. He seems hypocritical to use such labels and to combine belligerent leftists with level-headed leftists. Yet he talks about keeping an open mind and dissecting people's true reasonings for their feelings or intentions. I talked about, let's talk about Battlefield 5. And the women in Battlefield 5, Ubisoft, and Assassin's Creed black protagonists. Let's talk about the Ellie kiss in the Last of Us 2 trailer. All this other stuff I was talking about. But yeah, I think I'm done. I have my ramble. Hey, some YouTubers so hopefully you learned a lot. Please keep those messages in mind. Talked about a lot. Man, there's some YouTubers who make good money off of just rambling. God, what's his name? I don't even, Hassan, his stuff. I remember when he was on the Young Turks. I didn't watch the Young Turks all that much, but he's been popping off very recently, and he deserves it. Hopefully my rambles can one day get up there, and you guys really digest what it is that I'm saying. Obviously, I'm not the only person saying this. People that are greater than me, the founding mothers and fathers of the United States, black female and black male leaders who have died and who have come and gone throughout American history, obviously have been saying all of this stuff that I'm saying. If not like directly with this modern terminology, you can gather the truths from the articles and the things that they've left behind that we know of them, and just more people and just more black YouTubers that are finally pushing it and making it, finally, and who are saying similar stuff. When you are looking at something that is objective, and you are learned at it, I don't care who you are, you're gonna start coming to the same conclusions. So peace, guys. Have a nice day, and I'll see you around. You are loved. You are needed. I'll see you soon. Bye, gals and guys. And gender not conforming. Anyway, hey guys, this is my YouTube channel. My name is Matthew Jonathan Powell, and welcome. Thanks a bunch for sticking around for as long as you have. Please don't go yet. If you want to hit the like button, please do so. Share, subscribe. Donate a little money to my not Patreon Ko-fi. I seriously forgot. Keeping it in there. I don't care. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys stick around and you find something you like. Thanks so much. Hopefully you guys have a great time and a great day. I'll see you next time.